Welcome to our next Leading in the Context of COVID-19 Bite Size. This time we're focusing on building and maintaining trust. As we already know, trust is fundamental to leadership, and in the context of COVID-19, that is truer today than ever. That doesn't mean, though, that we know how to build it effectively. When I was researching this bite size, I looked at the work of the author Simon Sinek. What he said about trust was slightly terrifying, although not completely surprising. He said, asking me how to build trust is like asking me how to fall in love. Trust is not an act, it's a result of something. It is earned and evolves and develops over time. It's a series of actions you take to prove that you are worthy. As leaders, it's our role to create the environment for trust to develop. Simon also described it as creating a circle of safety. People look to their leaders, i.e. you and I, for guidance on what to do, what to expect and how to act. During uncertain and fluid times, the need for strong, calm, trustworthy leadership is more important than ever because it makes people feel safe. When trust is high within a team, there is cooperation. People work together and do their best work with a sense of shared purpose and commitment. Conversely, when trust is low or absent, people are selfish, cynical and paranoid. They hoard information, play it safe and talk about rather than to one another. In all teams, trust will be built and trust will be damaged or broken. It comes with the territory of human relationships. Trust is especially vulnerable during periods of rapid change or uncertainty, or when the team is working remotely, which is the reason that we wanted you to refocus on it now. There are two main approaches that I'm going to share with you in this bite size that will support you in building, developing, maintaining trust in the relationships with the people around you, particularly in the context of COVID-19. These are Stephen Covey's Trust Bank from his book The Speed of Trust, and the Trust Equation from the book The Trusted Advisor by David Maister, Charles M. Green and Rob Galford. Both of these have been occurring within our teams and with our colleagues consciously or unconsciously for as long as we've been in relationships with them. The purpose of this bite size is to support you in raising your awareness of them, to enable you to take more conscious and considered action, so that you can even more positively impact the levels of trust in your relationships. We're going to start with a trust bank, as the COVID-19 situation has the potential to generate some pretty significant withdrawals. With this in mind, it's useful to think about how you can consciously make deposits in your relationships to counteract those withdrawals and maintain trust. Stephen Covey's book, The Trust Bank, is based on the premise that any relationship is like a bank account that experiences both deposits and withdrawals. It's a metaphor that describes the amount of trust that's built up in a relationship. It's a feeling of safeness you have with another human being. When the trust account is high, communication is easy, instant and effective. If you haven't come across the Trust Bank before, you would like a reminder of it, you can access the bite-size video or handout on the intranet on the Real Bite Size page, so you can search on Real Bite Size. This metaphor works because it's something that we've all experienced, either from the deposits or withdrawals others have made to our own bank account or the deposits or withdrawals we have made to others. As leaders, every time we communicate, delegate, motivate, influence, lead meetings, address conflicts, give feedback, or navigate challenging discussions, etc., there's a potential impact on the trust banks we have with those around us. They're all moments that we can deposit or withdraw, resulting in a range of potential outcomes. Let's unpack the trust bank so we can make even more conscious decisions about it and our actions in relation to it. The trust bank is comprised of 4 cores of trust, all of which are required to develop credibility and grow trust. The first 2 are about our character, so our integrity, whether we're honest, fair and authentic, and our intent, whether we're open and demonstrate genuine care for others and their well-being. The other 2 are about our competence, so our capability, about whether we have the knowledge, skills and experience to do our job, and results, whether we achieve results and demonstrate a consistent track record. Remember, this is about results, not about activity. In the context of COVID-19, we're seeing deposits and withdrawals at both national and international levels, as well as more locally. So, for example, when we think about withdrawals, you might think about the Scottish Health Minister travelling to her second home during lockdown, so it's definite withdrawal from integrity. President Trump making suggestions about the use of disinfectant and UV light to combat COVID-19, probably a withdrawal from capability and results and potentially intention. And initial shortages of PPE, which is a withdrawal from intent or results. In terms of deposits, we've seen lovely things like the clap for carers and the general recognition and valuing of what the NHS and its staff does, a really positive intention towards us. The Prime Minister and Cabinet evolving and relying on specialist knowledge of others, so the likes of Chris Whitty, the Chief Medical Officer, demonstrating a deposit in capability and results. And then daily updates and opportunities for questions to be answered from the press and the public, which would demonstrate deposits in integrity and results again. It's what we do, not what we say, that causes people to trust us or not. Like a tree, our integrity forms the roots that give us stability and underpins and supports the trunk of intent, which in turn support the branches of capability and generates the leaves of results. Now we want to know what the trust bank is. Let's have a look at the actions we can take to achieve regular and effective deposits. The current balances in our trust banks for the relationships we have with our teams and colleagues will be a result of how we've behaved and interacted with them in the past. In that context, the actions we take to maintain or develop trust now will either be a continuation of the actions we have been taking or different or new actions because of the COVID-19 situation. Covey suggests that there are 6 major ways to make deposits in the trust bank, so let's have a look at the first 3 now. The first one is about understanding the individual, and we can do this by exploring what constitutes a deposit or a withdrawal for them, by finding out or reminding ourselves what's important to them by paying attention. And when having conversations with them, listening for understanding rather than to be able to respond. We can do this through the regular check-ins or informal conversations we have, as well as the more formal one-to-ones and supervision. Whilst the COVID-19 situation can make it seem we don't have time for these, they are more important now than ever. The second one Covey suggests is attending to the little things. As he says, in relationships, it's the little things that are the big things. So whilst kindnesses and courtesies, however small, create deposits, the converse is also true. So discourtesies and unkindnesses will certainly result in withdrawals. The third one is about keeping commitments. Keeping a commitment or a promise is a major deposit. Conversely, breaking one is a major withdrawal. Interestingly, a willingness to make commitments also creates deposits, and being unwilling to make any commitments is as much a withdrawal as making them and not keeping them. Linking to the circle of influence in the previous bite size, it's important to ensure that the commitments we make are within our control. So I will promise to call you by 3 p.m. today, rather than I promise to have an answer for you by 3 p.m. If we are reliant on someone else for the answer, we risk breaking a commitment and so causing withdrawal through no fault of our own. Now let's look at the last 3. The next one is clarifying expectations. The cause of almost all relationship difficulties is rooted in conflicting or ambiguous expectations around roles and goals. So you make deposits when you make expectations clear and explicit in the beginning. Now, in the context of COVID-19, because things are changing so quickly, it's important to support people to understand this. And so when things change, be honest and communicate this as quickly and clearly as possible, where you can, giving reasons for the change. Covey also recommends that we show personal integrity. Integrity includes and goes beyond honesty. So it's telling the truth and conforming our words to reality. Integrity is conforming reality to our words, so keeping promises and fulfilling expectations. Linking this to number 4 and clarifying expectations, sometimes changes may make it seem like you're not keeping your promises. So the more you invest in clarifying expectations, the more you'll protect and maintain your personal integrity. And finally, apologizing sincerely when you make a withdrawal. We're all human. We all make mistakes, and that is okay. What matters is our actions afterwards. Owning our own vulnerability by admitting our mistakes and saying sorry encourages others to trust us. It reminds them it's okay for them to make mistakes and role models that owning up and apologising sincerely are acceptable and valid. Now, these actions may seem like common sense. Having said that, things being common sense doesn't mean they're necessarily common practice. With that in mind, you may choose to do a bit of a quick self-assessment for each of the 6 ways that Covey has identified by asking yourselves the following questions. How many of these do I demonstrate regularly and consistently? How many of these do I experience regularly and consistently from others? And as a result of that reflection, what actions am I going to take? Remember, all trust accounts are truly joint accounts. Both parties have access to them and both parties must play their roles. It's worth noting that as humans, we tend to process and remember negative events more strongly than positive ones, as evolutionarily this kept us safe. In terms of the trust bank, this means that the ratio of deposits to withdrawals needs to be about 4:1 for us to stay in credit. Covey's Trust Bank is one of the ways to unpack trust so that you can take more conscious actions to build and maintain it. Let's have a look at another one which builds on the Trust Bank and clearly illustrates how elements of trust can impact one another. It's called the trust equation. Life and business move at the speed of trust. The most important of the 4 variables here is self-orientation. The more we put the interests of others first, the deeper their trust is in us. The more they trust us and the deeper the relationship. Put simply, to be successful, put others first. So let's explore those variables that Tom alludes to by looking at the trust equation. The trust equation and the resulting trust quotient allows us to put a value on trustworthiness and, even more importantly, to understand the variables that impact it. So let's start with the end in mind. As Simon Sinek said, trust is not an act, it's a result of something. It's earned and evolves and develops over time. The trust equation demonstrates this by showing that trust is the outcome of the equation. While some of us may choose to give trust straight away, until it is broken, research indicates that for deep and lasting trust to be maintained, the other 4 variables must score strongly. So let's look at the first. Credibility. Whilst most organisations put a premium on this factor, so credentials and skill mastery, etc., it's the least helpful in building trust. Credibility is about going beyond relevant and sufficient expertise and experience. To be credible in any situation where trust is sought, we must be true to our word, which really nicely links to integrity in the trust bank. And this leads us on to a sense of reliability, which is about delivering on our promises, and it's the most common strength in the trust equation, with 53% of respondents rating it as their highest component. Whilst partly about dependability, it's also about consistency, so our actions match our words and that we do this consistently, which links really nicely to results and the track record that we talked about in relation to the trust bank. There is our potential for us to be our own worst enemies here by committing to help or support others, and as a result of our busyness or disorganisation, we then don't deliver. Irrespective of our positive intentions, our actions or lack of actions will impact the trust people place in us. So the final one on the top line is intimacy. This is about how safe and secure others feel in trusting and depending upon us. It's about whether they feel they can trust us to keep something confidential. So notice this won't just be demonstrated by whether or not you keep what they say to us and keep that confidential. If you share information with them that somebody else has shared with you, it will equally damage the level of intimacy and so impact your levels of trust. The final variable is self-orientation. And Simon Sinek talks about this in terms of the true price of leadership, being the willingness to place the needs of others above your own. Great leaders truly care about those they are privileged to lead and understand that the true cost of leadership privilege comes at the expense of self-interest. This is the most impactful of all of the variables. Because of the way the equation works, and it's the only variable beneath the line, it means that the larger this is, i.e. the more we're focused on our own interests, the more impact it has on reducing the levels of trust. Conversely, the more we put the interests of others first, so the smaller the self-orientation score, the deeper their trust is likely to be in us. The more they trust us, the deeper the relationship, and thus the more we put us first, the faster and easier it is for us to build relationships with them. Put simply, to be successful in building trust, put others first. If you'd like to understand more about how trustworthy you are, you can take a free quiz based on the trust equation and receive a mini report outlining your areas of strength and how you can leverage these, as well as your areas of opportunity and how you can address them at the website here. Alternatively, you can reflect on when you're deciding whether or not to trust somebody, or reflecting on the level of trust that in relationship you are in, by thinking about what matters to you most from these variables, and from your experiences, what resonates with you most about this equation. So in terms of takeaway, I want to go right back to the beginning of this trust bite size, when I shared with you what Simon Sinek said about trust. Asking me how to build trust is like asking me how to fall in love. And here we are again, coming full circle and talking about love. To be trusted is a greater compliment than being loved. The COVID-19 situation is tough. Not only is it a crisis, it's a situation where we're all having different crises at different times. Trust is a form of PPE. It supports you and the people around you to feel safe, or at least safer. One of the most powerful and impactful things you can do as a leader is support those around you to trust themselves, and you can do this by you demonstrating your trust in them. And if you're not sure you feel willing or able to do that, then remember what Ernest Hemingway said. The best way to find out if you can trust somebody is to trust them. Okay, so as with all of our bite sizes, this is just one of a number of ways that we're offering support to you. They are the other real bite size on the intranet page. There's a selection of videos and handouts. There's the health and wellbeing intranet page and briefings. The leading in the context of COVID-19 intranet page, where you'll find this bite size along with all of the previous ones. The Our NHS People Wellbeing support, which I'll leave you with the details of in just a moment. And there's also our Twitter account, so if you don't follow us already, please do. Overall, we'd really value your feedback on these bite size and any other support we're providing. So if you've got any thoughts or requests, if you can email us at hrservicesupport@nchc.nhs.uk and title your email bite size. We look forward to hearing from you and sharing our next bite size soon.